Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because for those of you who actually have been longtime listeners, you know, I don't have a lot of repeat guests on the show, but there are a select few, which for me, I've had the opportunity to build, you know, a deeper relationship with and have a tremendous amount of respect for. That's not to say that the guests that I don't have respect for. That's not it at all. But I do hold a special place for this particular guest because we've collaborated quite a bit, and he just awes me all the time. And so hopefully he'll do that for you today. And actually, I don't say hopefully, I know he will. So Omar L. Harris, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Tim. Very happy to be back.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about Omar. Okay, so Omar was actually born to a chemical engineer father and a social worker mother in the working class town of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Omar L. Harris learned the values of connecting process to outcomes and the importance of being of service to others at an early age. Being the youngest of 4 boys and a family of 5 children, he endured a lot of hope and pressure to succeed where others had failed in order to uplift and support his family. Moving from Pittsburgh to Charleston, West Virginia, to Lake Charles, Louisiana, over the course of his childhood and adolescence, and engendered in Omar the ability to adapt to constant change, which has been his status quo as an adult living all over the U.S. and spending considerable time living and working in the Middle East, Asia, and Latin America. Omar is a former pharmaceutical general manager and Intent Consulting and Tempo.io founder, motivational speaker, and best-selling author with over 20 years experience in building high-performance organizations on 4 continents. He has managed multi-billion-dollar brands and led extensive organizations while working in the Middle East, Asia, Latin America, and in the U.S. He innovated blueprints for Jedi leadership, which is leading with justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, servant leadership, and 20 team performance acceleration principles called TPAPs that can be applied by leaders at all levels of professional experience. Over the course of his career, he embodied and championed positive psychology, Clifton strengths, and servant leadership with all his teams and organizations while also becoming a best-selling author. He is the CEO of Intent Consulting, which does coaching, training, publishing, productions, and technology, and his software company, Tempo.io, that's Tympo, is the world's first and best interactive meeting software application for boosting employee inclusion during the internal forums, town halls, annual meetings, fireside chats, and Ask Me Anything meetings. Omar resides in Charlotte, North Carolina with his family, and in his spare time, he loves traveling the world, connecting with and experiencing diverse cultures and people, and reading for inspiration and pleasure while staying connected with his family and closest friends. Omar L. Harris, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Let's do it, Jim.
All right, man. Now, you even shared with me before we started recording some things that you're actually preparing for this weekend, which to me was just another mind-blowing opportunity. And I think I think it kind of is one of those interesting points that I would really love you to share with our listeners and watchers. So tell us, what are you getting ready to do this weekend?
Yeah, so my sister is an actress, and she's been acting for over 20 years. In New York and LA, done TV, done film, done indie film. And so we came together during COVID of last year. I returned from living abroad. We were living closer together, and, you know, kind of stuck together during the pandemic. We decided to turn my first novel into a pilot screenplay for a TV series. We were like, why not do this? And so we did it. She submitted it to a competition called the Fade In Awards, which is a major Hollywood competition where the winners get to pitch their screenplays and their ideas to a bevy of well-known Hollywood entertainment production companies and agencies. And we actually won the grand prize. on our first pilot screenplay, which is like kind of crazy. So basically, we won that a prize in January, and now we are going this weekend, Friday through Monday, is the Pitch Fest. And so we are preparing to, we have collectively created 8 different TV show proposals over the course of the last 3 or 4 months. And we are going to be pitching these proposals to different agencies and production companies in the hopes that they move forward into production at some point in the future. So I think this is just, I think the message of all of this is really like, when you are strengths-based, living strengths-based, you try to continually find ways to apply your strengths and apply your potential and maximize your potential in all the ways that you possibly can. And this is just another avenue that opened up for us, and we're gonna go after it. So,
well, best of luck to you. I mean,
thank you.
Your sister. I'm sure the next few days are going to be a flurry of activity. So thanks for joining me today
of course,
on the Best Leader Show. And I wanted to have you on the show today because we've actually been talking over the past couple of months about some of the work that you're doing, and even though I'm the old white guy, for me, the whole connecting with your people, the diversity inclusion component, is may not seem something that is of interest to me, but I always knew inherently that when my people were engaged, when things were going well, that my customer was taken care of. So that's why I focus in on it so much. And what a lot of people may not know about me is, people always say, well, I've got friends that are diverse. I've got friends, is that we all have issues that we need to deal with. I mean, right. I grew up in an area where I was white minority, and people are like, well, what is that? Right. It's where I had people who of different ethnicity, which were more populous than where I was as a person, right. Because I grew up in a very blue collar area, and it's just what I was familiar with. So I was always, in the different mix. I was also in the Chicagoland area, and there's just a whole lot of different pockets of diversity, right. Which I learned to respect, and I've seen how understanding all of that has made a difference. Now, that's not to say that I'm excellent or supreme expert at it. I'm always trying to work at it because we are always needing to overcome just the things that inherent are part of our animal makeup,
right?
Getting into those bias issues and things like that we just may not even be aware of. And so I would really like to talk about where I wanted you is the thing that you've kind of pinpointed as a major gap in this whole inclusion piece. And that, because that's what your software company was created, but I think you've kind of evolved and realized that this seems to be a really difficult part and component of the overall both employee engagement and customer engagement. So tell us a little bit about inclusion and why it's so difficult.
So I think that if you think about imagine, for the sake of this conversation, and everybody listening, you've been appointed to the head of be the chief of diversity, equity, and inclusion for a major company, and basically you're working to try to improve these things internally and externally for customer groups, other stakeholders like the community, and maybe even the environment. So you've been given this charge. So when you go down a list of things you're trying to do, diversity, okay, you kind of understand, you can get the data from your departments and understand where you're diverse, where you're not diverse. You can look at your managerial ranks and the diversity is in your face. You can see whether you have it or not. And you can also talk to people to understand whether it's being leveraged or not. So are you innovating? Are you capitalizing on experience? Are you doing these things? So diversity, not to say that it's easy, it's more straightforward. Equity is hard because equity requires basically removal of privilege out of systems. So any system that is privileged, like one of the ones I'm tackling right now is around recruiting. So we if you think about a typical job description for any job, it is exclusionary by its design, right? So you have to have this many years of experience. You have to have these advanced degrees. You have to just to get in a screening interview with a recruiter who doesn't even work for the company you're trying to work for. So it's exclusionary right from the beginning. And so companies need to redesign job descriptions and how they recruit in order to cast a wider net so they can bring in more diverse talent. Because, just saying you want people with MBAs, well, that you excluded basically 85% of the population. And not all people with MBAs are great team players. As we talked about in our first interview together about the whom, these people don't necessarily make the best team players on an organization. So that's equity. And equity, talking about pay, talking about compensation, talking about how you onboard, talking about how you compensate, talking about who gets targeted when terminations happen. There are inequities in all those things. But once again, they're also easier to kind of pinpoint and identify. Once you start getting in that space, you can find them. Inclusion is like trust. So inclusion is like one of these intangible things because it's a feeling. Like, how do you know you're including people? How do you know people feel included? So they have a sense of belonging. They have a sense of, empowerment in a space. They feel safe to speak up and speak their truth and be their authentic selves in your environment. Inclusion is a lot more tricky to actually get your arms around and actually deliver for your employees, but it is fundamentally important. It's one thing to hire diverse talent. It's another thing to treat them equitably. It's a whole other thing for them to feel at home in your environment. And that's what inclusion ultimately deals with, is how do you create these safe spaces? How do you make it feel like a fun, engaging place where everybody belongs? Basically, your identities, whoever you are, especially if you come from a disenfranchised identity, you are accepted and appreciated for who you are. You're not whitewashed. You're not told to conform to norms that, change your hairstyle or don't, shave your face or not wear the traditional garb that you would traditionally wear over your hair or whatever it is. Whatever these conformities are, you're actually saying, listen, we want you for the beautiful, individual, unique person you are. We want all of that, because that's what's going to make us great. That is much trickier to tackle. But for me, it really starts with giving people a voice. When people feel they have a voice and their voice is being listened to, then that is when they begin to feel safe and they begin to trust the system. And until that happens, you don't really have belonging in a given environment. And so the technology that I'm working on is designed to create that feeling in the most important moments that happen in corporations, especially, medium to large corporations, where the senior leadership team is getting together with their entire organization to talk strategy, talk financial performance, talk reward and recognition, talk policy changes, or anything that's happening in organizations. Typically, this happens around 3 to 4 times a year. And what usually happens in these forums is the CEO gets there and he talks at the staff. Maybe they have a 15 or 20-minute Q&A session and they hear from 5 out of 100 people, and they go back to their offices and they feel good about themselves in terms of, oh, we really communicated. We told people what's going on, and now we can move forward with our initiatives. Well, what I've identified is that, and I identified this in my own experience when I was a general manager around the world, which was I would lead, and I made a great effort to try to be inclusive in my town halls, which is basically utilize interactive technology, use polling, take Q&A, and do Q&A for like 45 to an hour. But even me, with all my efforts to be inclusive, if you would have asked me, Omar, to what degree did your audience understand what you presented? To what degree did they agree with what you said? And to what degree were they aligned with it? I can't tell you. I couldn't have told you that. So that's the first point, is answering the business questions that really drive the ship, understanding, agreement, and alignment. And then for the first time, being able to parse these 3 things by demographics. So if participants can opt in via a fully anonymous survey, truly anonymous, they're basically their generation, their gender identity, their nationality, and their ethnicity. Then we can begin to parse understanding, agreement, and alignment by demographics, which means that I'm not listening to majorities anymore. I can get sentiment from specific groups as I'm communicating my plans. And the whole idea is, the big idea behind it is, okay, by listening to these groups and giving them a voice for the first time, now I can begin to make sure that the company is working for them, that this communication is working for them, that they know they have a voice because I'm showing it on the big screen for everyone to see. So that's basically how I'm going about trying to tackle the tricky issue of employee inclusion.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And as you're talking, and I was taking some notes, I started thinking about all the things that I think we hear about and we try to make sense of. So psychological safety. You didn't say psychological safety, but we hear a lot about psychological safety. And I think that's part of what you're talking about is getting to that point. Business agility, right? If I don't have, a lot of this alignment and this connection, you can forget the fact because, let's look at our society. Unfortunately, our society conditions us to be polarized. Social media is exacerbating, accelerating polarization. All of those things are occurring. And if we don't create this, this place to where, people can actually, be mindful and then therefore address those particular issues, that agility is gone, that trust is gone, that engagement is gone. And so therefore that customer experience is going to get negatively impacted. We're going to get disrupted. We're not going to be creative thinking and innovative. There's these, it's just amazing to me to see how all of these different subsets and you can call them variables or whatever, ultimately come to this conclusion, which is business profitability, and organizational growth.
Exactly. Not listening to your people is a business risk. Not including your people is a business risk. Not maximizing diversity is a business risk. Not being equitable in your policies and practices and procedures is a business risk. And having unjust policies and procedures is a business risk. All of these things will disrupt your ability to be successful and profitable in today's modern workforce.
Okay. So, and I think that's a really interesting concept when you start talking about all of these risks associated with it. So, I oftentimes fall back on this one particular study that reported, and I'm sure it hasn't changed, but it was like from about 15 years ago to talk about what types of discussions are happening, at the board level of organizations. So, and they were really making it quite simple and saying, okay, let's talk about the things that are growth and positive, and let's talk about the things that are, somewhat, negative and risk-based. And they were saying how 85% plus of all the conversations that happen in boardrooms around the world are all negative and risk-based. They're all threat-based, right?
Yeah.
And so if I'm taking a step back and I'm looking about this, is I wonder in how many of those organizations, all the things that we're talking about are actually part of the risk discussion.
They're not at all. And that's the whole point. Basically, this is not being treated as a business risk situation. It's being treated as today's HR issue or corporate social responsibility or PR. That's basically the umbrella of JEDI stuff. When in actuality, these are fundamental business risks. The data reflects it. Since 2012, companies are losing $64 billion annually from people leaving their employers due to discrimination, unjust, inequitable policies. In the last 3 years, since 2018, CEOs who were found guilty of discriminatory policies and practices, their companies lost $4 billion in market capitalization over the last 3 years. And so this is business risk. Anytime the money is taken away from the bottom line, it's business risk. And so when I was a general manager, the way I managed was progressively positive, based on positive psychology. But a big part of your job is anticipating, measuring the impact of, and having contingency plans for potential business risks. And people risk is a huge business risk. Anything that will drain your organization of its talent, of its ability to innovate, of its ability to just handle the workload of business. Imagine if 2,000 factory workers walk off the floor tomorrow. That's a business risk, right? You can't, create your widgets or pack your products or do whatever it is. These are business risks. So employee risks should be at the top of the list of CEO business risks. But unfortunately, they're not being treated that way.
Well, and there was one study that just came out talking about, this was really recent, where the estimation is that 40% of all workers are looking to leave.
Yes. People are checked out. We lost 4 billion employees in April due to resignations. Resignations, not termination. People said, you know what? I'm out. My company wants me to come back to the office or whatever it is and go back to a hybrid working model. I don't want to do it anymore. I've had a year to reflect. I'm at home. I've learned maybe about another way to kind of monetize or make money in a different way through real estate or through cryptocurrency or through starting my own business, whatever it is. And I'm going to take a chance on myself. People wouldn't be resigning if they weren't optimistic about their future and pessimistic about their corporate future.
Okay, so what does that mean, man? I mean, okay, so what? I mean, for me, I always try to look at the opportunities, right?
Right.
Not to say that I always try, I always move to capture them, but I try to, seek them because I'm more of that, positive thinking and outlook type of person.
Yeah.
And so, give me some hope here, man.
Well, the hope is that basically that we have an opportunity to improve, basically to take on the lessons, to listen and to react, right? So we're going to be reactionary for a little while because we haven't listened. Corporate leaders haven't been listening for the last, 10 or 20 years. They haven't been paying attention. But hopefully now this has grabbed their attention. So with attention can come appropriate action and then, impact. So redesigning. So this is a trend right now, a moment in time where it's time for businesses to modernize. And if they choose to capitalize on this trend, and there's so many people out there that can help businesses do this in the right way, then we can really, we will be really in a really good shape 5 to 10 years from now in terms of the state of our workplaces, the amount of diversity we see at the top of the house in terms of CEOs and boards, the mixing of teams. So we have more heterogeneity on teams and have managers who know how to manage heterogeneity and manage change and manage risk. It's going to make us better. So the positive thing about this is we have an opportunity to get better. Adversity gives you a chance to get better. And so for those leaders willing to take on the challenge, this is an opportunity to level up and really, really get ahead of the game. And that will create competitive advantage in the future.
Well, and as you're talking, okay, so one of the things for me when I work with a lot of my clients from either an advisory perspective or a service perspective is the difference between knowing and doing. It's the whole what is referred to as execution. So now I know, but what do I do and what do I need to do and how do I actually move down the path of transforming and improving and all of those types of things. So you talked about measurement, you talked about these different opportunities that exist, but then I also start thinking about a lot of the work that's been done by Gallup. You talked about strengths, and they refer to how really one of the major contributors, and we're talking 80% plus of reasons why people actually leave is because of the direct relationship and connection that they have with their immediate supervisor. So then I start visualizing hierarchical chains. Right. Yep. So it's like, okay, I have a frontline leader and I have a senior level leader who's trying to connect and, doing all of these types of things that you're saying, are vital, but there's a whole lot of layers within there. So, hey, I may be doing just fine up here from an executive perspective, but by the time it gets down here, there's a disconnect and people are still, leaving. So I know I threw a lot of things out at you, but if you can kind of sort through the top and front line, and making sure that that's aligned. And then, how to close the gap between what I know, we need to do this, and actually getting it done.
So I would say first start with what is your definition of a good job for the senior guys? Because if their managers aren't aligned, they're not doing a good job. That's fundamentally their job, is to support these people to not lose their people. So that's a fundamental part of their job description. And so I would argue that if the managers aren't able to keep their talent, or they have the wrong type of managers in place, so the talent gets turned off by these managers, then that's the senior leader's fault. And that's an area that they have to take first action. So I think that definitely you need Jedi managers. You need leaders at that level, middle management level, who are the representative of how the company leads and how the company manages and what the company cares about. They have to literally be the ones, imagine like pillars holding up the house. That's your frontline managers. They're the ones holding up everything else. If people detect incongruencies in their behavior, actions, values, and beliefs versus what is being said in the annual reports and the public statements or whatever it is. That's why they check out. So I think that is fundamental that we work on the managerial level as part of the restoration efforts of organizations. So I think that will be one to I will look at it from that perspective is, am I truly serving and supporting my managerial level if, we have the wrong managers? Gallup says 82% of people in managerial roles are the wrong people for those jobs. So, there's some hard decisions to be made, back to the pessimistic side of things. But yeah, if we have the wrong managers, what do? Garbage in, garbage out. You've got to make the tough decisions. You've got to renovate and restore. Basically everything else you build in this house is going to fall through the cracks if you don't restore the foundation. And that managerial level is your foundation. So you have to kind of, sometimes when you're restoring a house, you got to rip out the floorboards. You got to, make it nice so that you can basically build on top of it. And so that would be something that people don't want to hear about that, but it's an honest take, which is, we're maintaining a status quo because we're afraid to take the action that's actually going to deliver the kind of results we want. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but there needs to be a plan whereby over time, over the next 12 months, we're going to reevaluate all of our managers, and we're going to basically renovate that level of the house. But first, what do I believe as a senior leader? What are my behaviors and values and actions? Am I being congruent? Have I really adopted these modern mindsets, or am I just doing it because it's today's buzzword, or it's in the media today, or it's in the zeitgeist right now? So you have to check yourself first, because everything else you implement after that is going to basically be influenced by your own biases, beliefs, and morals and values. And if you really don't believe in it, I would say don't do anything at all, because you're going to mess it up. So I would say those two things would be my guidance.
Okay, so that's talking about an organization as it exists today. But as you're talking, I also start thinking about just the shifts in society and what has occurred over the past decade, and that it seems to me like there is a significantly greater level of initial apprehension and distrust in all types of organizations. And I think the job is becoming even more difficult to make sure, that we create this alignment. How harder is it really getting? To me, it seems significant.
Well, this is an area where I have a lot more optimism, because when I think about what a business is, if you think about its fundamental, a business is a group of people who have agreed to come together to produce something of value, to receive value in return, so they can begin an ongoing concern. So that thing that we're trying to create has no political affiliation, has no racial identity, has no religious bias or belief. Whatever we're creating only has in it what we put into it in a business environment. So business for me is like Switzerland. Business is neutral. I don't care who you are coming in the door, where you are from your community, Here within these walls, we are together to do this thing. And when our higher purpose is related to using the money from producing this thing to do good in the world, and I think we can all agree what good is in general, what good is in the world, then that unifies us and gets us out of these spaces of division. So business can be a great unifier, just like sports is a great unifier. Basically, you see, these people probably, if you look at an arena of people supporting a given sports team, they probably couldn't have a conversation with each other outside of the arena, but in that arena, they're all rooting for the same team, right? But if they actually sat down and had a beer together and talked through their belief systems, they might find out they have more differences or more arguments. But actually, when they're in the arena, the business environment, they're rooting for the same team. That's the optimism I have for business specifically, because it's built on the foundation of, we are here, you get paid, we all get paid to produce whatever this thing is. And so that's why we're together. And so that reason for being together is enough for us to be progressive and to embrace all of these kind of things that are going to make us better at putting that thing out the door.
Well, as you're talking, I also started thinking about where you may start looking at this a little bit sideways. So let me give you an example. There are certain organizations that have certain core values and beliefs that do align, with certain religions, for example.
Right.
One of the fastest growing fast food restaurants, Chick-fil-A, very much, Christian value based, so much so that they aren't even open on Sundays, but yet they're defying all of the economic, recommendations in regards to being open, 7 days a week. So they're beating out competitions that are open yet another day. And it's just, they're remodeling, a lot of their restaurants to handle more volume. It's, you look at this, you're like, well, wait a minute. If you're talking about this environment by which there is none of these, biases and things like that, and, we're creating inclusion for everybody, they're not doing that, right?
Well, I would argue the translation. I did a podcast with Rocky DeStefano, who is a franchise owner for many Chick-fil-A's in Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida. And we chatted, and he basically said, listen, the Christian values get translated in business into servant leadership principles. That's how the employees experience them. They experience this as servant leadership. So if you're an employee working for Chick-fil-A and you have Sunday off, what do you think about that? Are you thinking about going to church on Sunday? Or are you thinking about, my company cares about my well-being? They're giving me a day to just, out of all the fast food restaurants I could work for, this company gives me a day for my well-being, for my spiritual well-being, whatever form that takes. And there are people of all different stripes working for Chick-fil-A is what I'm trying to say. Like, there are atheists working for Chick-fil-A, there are Muslims working for Chick-fil-A, there are Christians working. They don't just hire Christians. So even though they're a faith-based company and they wear their faith on their sleeve, when it comes to putting great chicken sandwiches and great lemonade out the door, it's more about servant leadership principles than it is about the Christian faith that underpins it.
Okay. So I think that context, helps a lot. All right. So if I start thinking about, you mentioned the optimism, you mentioned several different things associated with, where we can see workplaces, transform and have, significantly better outcomes. But, the workplace is not what it used to be. And when you start thinking about one of the important factors, when it does come to engagement, when it does come into, being able to be more agile, proximity is an important component. And so if we're all dispersed and we're all over the place, what additional dynamic or what additional hurdle has that actually created that we now have to cross?
So I always go back to, I don't know if you've seen this, the trust equation. And the trust equation is trust equals credibility plus reliability plus professional intimacy divided by self-orientation. So for me, if trust is what drives influence and influence is what drives business, basically pointing people in a direction and getting them to adhere and to follow and to move in that direction, that has nothing to do with physical space and connectivity, in my mind. That equation is really about, so the question is, how do I build my credibility from a distance? How do I build my reliability from a different distance? And how do I do the extra work to build professional intimacy, which is harder from a distance than the other two things, while still lowering my self-orientation? So a lot of managers last year when COVID hit, they lost trust because it became all about what they were trying to do to prove to their managers that they were still working. So a lot of senior leaders were like packing everyone's calendars around the clock because they needed to monitor everything. And because they knew they were going to get a question from whoever's on top of them, like, so tell us what's happening with the work and how the people are doing. So they basically, their response to that was, no work-life balance, meetings around the clock, meetings at lunch hour, meetings early in the morning, meetings late at night, because they know you're at home, they know you're always on. So they took advantage of that in a negative way, but they lost professional intimacy and their self-organization went up, so they lost trust. And once again, while we're seeing this gigantic resignation trend, people opting out and leaving, other reason people were leaving is there were a whole lot of people who were still working in a physical space while everyone else is at the house. Those people are some of the ones who are like, man, we're burned out. Like we held this whole thing up for a year and a half. Restaurant workers, healthcare workers, we held this whole thing up. We're burnt out. We need a break. So that's another piece of that. Just another people who are opting out. So I would say that if you're looking at this virtual world and like trying to figure out how to make it work, I have an executive coachee now who's general manager of an operation in Chile, and he's doing this from Philadelphia. And we have chats about how he's doing his job. This guy is going above and beyond. He's doing coffee chats with his team. He's doing customer meetings. He's doing everything he can do from afar to demonstrate and build that professional intimacy with his team, person by person, team by team, department by department. They're seeing him. He's present. He's visible. And so he's doing his job. So basically his trust quotient, his trust scores right now, after 90 days in the job, are quite good because he's focused on that and done a great job of actually delivering all that. So you can do it from anywhere.
So
it's just harder.
You're harder. And so it's, there's some different competencies and skill sets that are required. And for me, I oftentimes, because I had to learn it myself, is to get an understanding of, competencies are that pillar and the foundation, and skills therefore come on top of that, right? I might have to build a competency that, maybe I didn't have to rely upon when I did have the proximity. And now that I have to, and some of that comes down, to, the whole openness, aspects. I think you have to be a different leader when it comes to being open in order to have that virtual and, business, type of intimacy than we've ever had before. And that's been difficult because for many of us, and when you think about it from a societal perspective, the way that we grew up was, shut up and listen and do what you're told. Right. And so that kind of causes us to not be as open as we now need to be.
Yeah, you have to be authentic in your own way. You have to show your space, just like everyone else is showing their space. You have to reflect your challenges that you're going through, that we're all going through. To be, as I say, you have to be a human being first. To be a leader, you have to be human first. Be human. But I would argue, I think that the competencies haven't changed. Even if you're in a physical space, if you are a non-relational oriented boss, you're not going to create trust. So you just carry that over, and it exacerbates with distance. So I'd say that becomes a bigger problem with in a virtual environment. Well, people who were really good at building connections, they just had to figure out how to do the same thing that you were already good at in a different way. So the barrier was lower for them, the people who never felt they had to do it. Based on what I've seen and what I've observed.
That's a great point. Oh, man, with all of this, there's a whole lot of, emotion and excitement and, opportunity, threats. There's a whole lot of things that are flying at us, and that is picking up at an ever increasing rate. But one of the things that we often try to use as North Star on the Fast Leader Show are quotes, and we've had some awesome ones shared along the way. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share that kind of helps you stay pointed in that right direction?
So, I think it links to what we're talking about right now. Emerson said, "No change of circumstances can overcome a defeat of character." Just think about that. So, no change. If your character has been defeated, if you haven't been the person you're supposed to be, changing circumstances, moving to a new job, or working virtually, or none of that is going to transform how you are perceived by others in the environment, because you didn't do the work to basically recuperate from that character defeat.
Well, where you are right now, and even what you're even getting ready to go into this weekend with your sister, there's a whole lot of learnings that you've had along the way, and we like to share those stories if we can. Is there a time that you can remember where you've gotten over the hump and it made a difference for you?
All the time. I think that now, I've been working for a year on my own now since I left my corporate job. I think it comes with a lot of highs and lows as you try to kind of build, but I've been spending a year trying to figure out my angle and how I'm going to basically do this. But a recent example of overcoming the hump is, I just published a book, this is out now, and you start getting negative.
So what's the title? Give us the title real quick.
Be a Jedi leader, not a boss. Leadership in the era of corporate social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Out now. I woke up in the morning a few weeks ago, and I woke up to a really bad review. And in that moment, you're sitting, I'm literally just opened my eyes, opened up Amazon and saw the review. And I was like, this is what a way to start the day. But I'm like, listen, at the end of the day, everyone's entitled to their opinion. As a book writer, I know this is my 5th book. It just always hurts when someone calls your baby ugly, and you just have to kind of roll with the punches and understand that you're not going to, what you're doing is not going to be for everybody, especially with a book like this, especially in today's environment. I know that I'm going to get more vitriol than I've ever received for my work in the past. So just, basically, help me get over the hump is talking to my wife. She builds me back up and says, listen, it's all right. This is nothing we didn't expect to happen. And you just go about the process in the day, go back to the gym, work off that stress from that review, work it out, and then go get back into the day. So I think that basically when I'm hitting a confrontation or obstacles, I try to do something physical, and that really helps me kind of work it out, muscular in my stress, get the stress out, and then get back to your routines. And that will allow you to overcome those hurdles and those humps.
Well, and the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Omar, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Omar Harris, are you ready to hoe down?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
For what's holding me back is basically time management. I need to be a better time manager.
And what is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
That to run my own race. Don't look sideways. Don't compare myself to anybody else. Just run my own race.
And what is one of the best tools that you believe helps you lead in business or in life?
What helps me lead in business or life is the whom. Hiring with work ethic, heart, optimism, and maturity to make sure that I get the right DNA right from the beginning.
And what would be one book you'd recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Being a Jedi Boss on your show notes page as well as your other books.
I would say The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek is a recent one that I really loved.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net and doing a search on Omar. You'll actually find another episode by Omar as well. And I think listening to both of these and watching both of these will actually give you a great insight into making an impact in your own organization. Okay, Omar, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you've been given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you can take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take it all. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I would take back servant leadership to myself and the power of inverting the triangle right from the beginning, and orienting myself to that standard right from the beginning would be what I would take back to myself.
Omar, I've had a great time chatting with you today and look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yes, sir.
But if you could, before we get to maybe even having you on for a third time, share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you.
So website, www.omarlharris.com, LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/Omar L. Harris, and Twitter, Strengths Leader.
Omar L. Harris, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and helping us all get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.